Doug, thank you, Larry. Doug, what other things would you like to add about tips for people who want to shoot 24p and want to do it right?
Well, there's an old trick that's used in the movies all the time is have some foreground object that isn't so blurred if you're panning, and you'll see it in movies if you start watching for it. You know, there's the entrance to the cafe.
Right.
The camera wants to pan over to the table where some actress is, and some waiter will come by in the foreground while the camera pans to kind of give some component of the screen that's not blurred. And one of my experiences with that old tradition of the movies was in the Back to the Future ride, which was limited by 24 frame IMAX dome projection. And if you take 24 frames and you go like that with it, displacement from frame to frame is sometimes several feet per frame on the screen in a fast action scene. And so we designed the entire show for the Back to the Future ride to be about chasing another DeLorean car, which stayed in the foreground and stayed in focus. We were reverse engineering the story not to blur. So you tell me, I hate 24 frames.
And the film look is all of those tricks that are part of the skills of the directors and cinematographers, directors of photography. But I'm with you. I'd rather 24 was never around.
Well,
I'm going to stay alive until.
Yeah, but I love motion flow because it interpolates.
Yes.
But I don't know if all of you know what motion flow is or what Panasonic or various other manufacturers' frame interpolators that are built into TV sets are doing is that they're trying to average between two adjacent frames and build an intermediate frame, and sometimes build 3 or 4 frames to try to increase the clarity. But if the incoming image is already badly blurred, there's not enough data there to reconstruct a sharp image. It stays blurred. So motion flow can't fix that.
Right.
And I was talking to Dennis Murin, he's a friend of mine, and he's one of the top guys at ILM, and he's done a lot of great visual effects, probably has a zillion Academy Awards. But he's been looking at old Laurel and Hardy films, which were shot with a very narrow shutter opening in the old days, the black and white days. They needed all the light they could get, so there's probably a 45-degree or 90-degree shutter opening. So the frames are sharp, and when he puts on his motion flow, he says it looks like it's live. Because it can build the intermediate frames from the sharp frame.
The clarity's there originally.
So there's a lot of stuff going on that has to do with the way the human brain ingests moving images and does interpolation. And that just brings up to me 3D, which is what's
We'll get there in just a minute.
That, yeah.
First, I want to ask Mark, what's your experience with 24 frames? How much have your clients been asking for it? How much have you done?
I do a fair amount of it. Clients tend to ask for it more than they get it because most of what I do involves either direct live transmission or at the very least live event shooting. And there are issues with doing 24p, just simple latency. You add 2 frames of latency to the video, and that causes a problem in the control room. You have to delay the audio to match that. You've already got multi-viewers, which is more delaying. You may have LCD TVs, which is more delaying. Now you have someone on an intercom. You're several frames late. Stuff is coming back on the intercom. There's a slap. So there's lots of reasons why you tend not to want to use it for that. There's other reasons why you may not want to use it just based on what transmission you're doing. There are encoders that can find the redundant fields, get rid of them, and improve the efficiency of the transmission. But there are other encoders that see the redundant fields, can't calculate what the motion is, and actually reduce the efficiency of the transmission. Doug mentioned the viewing angle or the size of the image. When Rent was done as a Broadway theater production that was sent into movie theaters, it was shot at 24p, but it was shot by a video crew. And everyone was looking at little monitors, and everyone loved the look. And then it got projected on giant theater screens, and it was strobe, 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 with the images moving feet as it was going across.
So that's a big warning.
Yeah, so it probably would have been better to have done that one at 60. But I also feel a sort of Winston Churchill quote about government. Democracy is the worst form of all possible governments except for all of the other ones. When you want that particular look, 24p gives you that look. And I did Eric Clapton's Crossroads Guitar Festival in June, and the producers there insisted on doing it at 24p. And was right there. I was seeing the performers on stage. I could go into the truck and see stuff. And yet every time I glanced at the program monitor, I was, oh, what's that? Like some special thing was on here. Oh, that's what they're doing on stage. It didn't look like something we were shooting live. It looked like something that was a movie that someone had
Right.
created. And even though we were in the control room, it couldn't have been us doing it because it was a movie that we were watching. By the way, someone, I think it was Jim, said earlier I should mention resources for if you want to do 24p, how to do it right. Get a copy of the American Cinematographer Manual. Read the panning speed sections. It's something, as Doug said and Larry said, it's in the cinematographer's blood. They know what to do. They know how to do this stuff. We, as video people, don't know how to do that. And we need to know it if we're going to be doing 24p.
Well, what about 30p? Here's a frame rate that doesn't have the 3.2 pull-down problem. It goes more easily into a editing timeline that's based on 60 pictures per second. Doesn't it have enough of the 24p look to be convincing? Why don't we use that?
There's some people who say that it does have enough of the look. I am not one of them.
Okay.
It looks different, certainly. To me, it does not look like movies. It looks like some attempt that somebody made to get a movie-type look. I should note, by the way, in the opposite direction, that for several years now at the International Broadcasting Convention, the European Broadcasting Union and the BBC have been showing things at 120, 150, 300 frames per second, and showing the tremendous increase that you can get in dynamic resolution by doing that. And they would like us to be shooting everything at very high frame rates and then doing something like what Doug was talking about and go down to whatever exhibition frame rate you want to go to, but having the dynamic resolution to begin with so that you can then do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Larry, you want to add something?
Well, to answer your question about the 30 frames per second, I think a lot of viewers would accept it as being reasonably like the 24 frame. But the directors and DPs, they see the difference, and they call the shots. They said, no, we want the film look, it's got to be 24. Also, 30 works fine in the US. But the beauty of 24 is you can get to the 25 and the 60 relatively crude, speed change for the Europeans, 3.2 for us, but everybody accepts that, and 24 has that global universality about it that 30 does not. Getting to 25 from 30 can be done digitally, but it's not as simple as the 24. And that's really the rationale.
Okay. Thank you. Doug, do you want to add something to that?
Well, I don't think there's any one answer. I think that there's different content that's appropriate for different frame rates. And I think when people think about sports or news, 24 frames doesn't cut it. It looks like a movie. It doesn't look live. That's a texture that's we don't have words in the English language to describe that subjective difference between 24 and 60i or 60p. And I think one of the things that's going to start happening in the industry is Jim Cameron is going to be one of the guys that's going to push that frontier, is that you make a movie in 3D, and 3D distribution is really where the bulk of the box office was in Avatar, biggest grossing movie of all time. And that movie is about involving you in another world. It's what I would call an immersive kind of environmental experience. It's not just a dramatic story. Jim intends to make Avatar 2 and Avatar 3 at 48, 60, or 72 frames. He hasn't decided yet. That has to do with some standards issues of what the projector manufacturers are going to be able to deliver, what the media servers are going to be able to do, what the Digital Cinema Initiative decides to do, et cetera, et cetera. But he wants to go to that reality-based immersive thing, which also solves a lot of horrible problems that 24 frames introduces into 3D.
And what's different about 3D that makes the judder more of a problem?
Well, 3D is two images superimposed that have slight differences between them, left eye, right eye differences. Mm-hmm. If the motion of an object on the screen from one frame to the next meets or exceeds the displacement between the left and right eye, the 3D goes away. It's lost totally. And you've got all these movie directors that want to do action scenes and car crashes and stunts and fights and all this stuff with fast camera moves and slamming fists and explosions. And if you actually analyze those frames, there is not any information there for substantial periods of time, and the 3D effect virtually vanishes. He's very frustrated by it because he's geeky like me, and we like scrutinize it. So that's why I'm a big advocate of this whole idea that Mark was talking about, a kind of oversampling concept, shooting more than you need, but doing it so it's mathematically relevant to all the other subsampled versions you might want to make, because there's still a lot of projectors in the world that project 24 frames sprocket at acetate. You've got to be able to deliver your product to them smoothly, and it has to look as good as that. So I'm messing around with shooting at very high frame rates
Okay.
at wide shutter speeds so that I can blend frames to derive various frame rates.